Well, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to bring this content to you because now more than ever, it is more accessible to build wealth, to build a legacy, to have financial peace and freedom more than it's ever been in the past. And I'm excited to show you the steps on how to get there and how you can build wealth for yourself and your family. So this is the Wealth Building Webinar 101 from Christian Wealth Management. My name is Nathan Cruz. I'm a financial advisor with Christian Wealth Management. I have been doing my work for about 6.5 years now. I joined the firm at the end of 2014, and I love sharing information and helpful things like this to my clients, to just anyone who basically anyone who basically is wanting to listen and empower themselves and better their financial future. So first off, let's start on why we build wealth. So financial advisors, finance gurus, self-help books will give you a myriad of reasons why you should build wealth. But since our firm's name has Christian in front of wealth management, I'm going to refer to what the Bible has to say on wealth building. First off, wealth is seen as a blessing from God, right? Proverbs 10:22 says, "It is the blessing of the Lord that makes rich, and he adds no sorrow to it." Proverbs 28:19 says, "Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits will have plenty of poverty." And Proverbs 28:20, the verse right after, it says, "A faithful man will abound with blessings, but whoever hastens to be rich will not go unpunished." So there's a lot there, and the Bible is very dynamic when speaking about wealth. One, it's a blessing from the Lord, and two, it has to do with being industrious, with working hard, with being diligent, with being wise, things like that. And so the Bible speaks about wealth from that framework and really sees wealth as a tool. The Bible also gives us example of many wealthy people who are righteous. So there's the biggest example of that is Job, which the book of Job is written about. He was a very rich man. God allowed Satan to test him, and Satan took away all his wealth and his family. And Job passed the test of righteousness, and God gave him back his wealth and his family fourfold. And so Job is a very good example of that. Joseph in the book of Genesis, who was originally sold into slavery by his brothers, made his way up to the advisor of the Pharaoh, and he advised the Pharaoh to store grain for the 3-year famine that was to come. And then Proverbs 31 talks about the godly wife who is shown to be both wise and industrious. And so the Bible gives many examples of wealthy people who are righteous. God also gives warnings regarding the temptations of wealth. See, Proverbs 3:9-10 says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, and from the first of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine." Proverbs 11:44 says, "Riches do not benefit on the day of wrath, but righteousness rescues from death." And 1 Timothy 6:10 gives us a warning. It says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." So again, a lot to unpack here, but we are told to honor the Lord with our wealth. Really, that wealth is not the end-all, be-all goal of life. It is a tool that you steward and you manage and you plant, and it grows, and it doesn't save you, right? The Proverbs 11:4 verse clearly shows that righteousness is better than wealth, because wealth in the end can't satisfy your soul. And 1 Timothy 6 gives us that warning of the love of money. So if money is your ultimate pursuit of life, if that's all you want in life and you pursue that above all else, that can lead to all types of sin. So now that we have gone through why we should build wealth, and of course sermons have been preached on this, but I just want to give the 30,000-foot view on the reasons why we should build wealth from a biblical standpoint. Now let's get into the steps of how to actually build wealth. And that first step is to build a budget. Now you're going to ask me, wait, I'm here to figure out how to expand my net worth, compound it over time. Why are we talking about a budget? And the reason we're doing that is because that is the building block of wealth building. If you aren't telling your money where to go and it's telling you where it should go, you're never going to actually save money aside to build wealth. And so that is why we start with the budget. So this is the foundation of wealth building. And creating a budget is very simple. First, you list all of your monthly expenses. Your fixed expenses are the expenses that are always there and are pretty consistent from a dollar amount. So things like rent, mortgage, utilities, life insurance premiums, things like that. Those are fixed expenses. And some of them will vary month to month. So your energy bill can be different month to month, but it's always going to be there because you need that to keep your four walls of your house up and your life going. Variable expenses are those expenses that are really dependent upon you and your spending habits. So gas can be a variable expense, grocery money, eating out money, entertainment, those things are variable expenses because you can choose whether or not to spend on them, and you can kind of set that budget. So the next step is to assign how much you spend or anticipate to spend each month. So for fixed expenses, it's very easy. You just look on, your energy statement or your utility bill, your leasing agreement, and that is the amount that you pay every month. Variable expenses, you can actually go into your bank statements, into your credit card or debit card statements, and you can, after itemizing out the types of variable expenses that you pay, you can then take a month or two's history in your statements and then add up each of those categories and make like an average, and then that could be the starting point of what you're going to budget for those variable items. Now, another thing to note too is that your budget should be limited by how much income you make, right? If you make $3,000 a month and your budget says, oh, I'm spending $3,500, well, obviously that's not good. That's not going to cut it. You are going to need to work and live within your budgetary means. And after you do that, after you assign how much you anticipate to spend or will spend each month, then you track your budget, because it doesn't make sense and it would be worthless to set up a budget initially and then not see if you're actually following your budget. And then more importantly, for the variable expenses, not seeing your spending habits and your spending trends. And so that's the power of a budget, and that's telling where to go. And also, you want to be zeroing out your budget. That means all the income that you take in, everything is assigned to a budget item. Now, again, a budget item can also be savings, right? And that's very important for the next few steps here, is that you should have your budget controlled to where you can allocate money to savings, whether that be retirement savings, stocks or bond savings, saving for a new car, something like that. Savings can be allocated and made to be a budget item. Here's an example of a budget, and you can see all the items listed out here. And as you can see, I listed retirement savings as an example as well. And this first column here is the budgeted amount per month, so the expected the expected amount you anticipate to spend during the month for all these items. The actual is the actually tracked amount that you spent, and so as you can see, the fixed rates or the fixed expenses, these are all matching the expected. But as you can see with the variable items, there is some difference there, right? And so groceries, this person didn't spend as much in groceries or eating out, but they overspent in entertainment. So that is why the budget's a great tool, because you can collect months and months of data, and usually I would wait till about 3 months to heavily alter your budget, because you can look at your 3 months spending habits and you can average that out, or you can adjust things based on how much you actually spend. So you may have an idea of how much you spend when you first set up your budget, but then how you actually spend will show up in the data. And that is really, really powerful for you. And that is telling your money where you want it to go. So after you budget, after you get your budget down pat, and you're using it and you're tracking it, and oh, by the way, there are many great apps that can be used to track your budget. You know, there's Mint, there's Dave Ramsey, every dollar, and so you can use those type of things to track your budget. But anything that really works for you, an app, a Google spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, writing it on a piece of paper, whatever works for you, do that. The next step is dealing with debt. And now debt is really important to look at because while not all debt is bad, Americans are historically bad at utilizing it. Now I'll show you why here. So I got my, I pulled some information off the internet from Bankrate.com and other sources, and I got the median household debt for 4 different categories. There's the credit card debts, there's personal loans, car loans, and student loans. So these are the average debts for the American households that carry over, right? For credit cards, 75% of adults carry over balance. And so that usually means that they're paying interest on it. Sometimes people utilize zero interest credit cards that have zero interest for 12 or 18 months. So that can be a factor as well. But in general, people who carry over balances every month are paying interest on their credit cards. So let's put a monthly dollar amount next to each of these averages, right? So if you had $53.15 in credit card debt and you had 20% APR, that's roughly $212 a month. For personal loans at $16,000 with a 5-year term and 5% APR, that's $302 a month. Car loans at $20,000 at a 5-year term with a 3% APR is $360 a month, and student loans at $33,000 with a 10-year term at 4.5 APR, that equates to a $342 payment a month. Now, as you can see, that adds up to quite a bit, about $1,000 or so in payments, right? A little bit more than that. And that's a huge portion of your budget. So again, not all American households carry these types of debts, but even $200, even $300 is a pretty significant part of your budget to be paying towards negative interest. So that's a loan that has interest that is accruing against you and doing nothing to build your wealth. And so here is a way to get rid of debt that is superfluous, right? And this is called the debt snowball. So the debt snowball is really simple to understand. You basically take all of your loans and you categorize them and prioritize them by their balances, right? So if we take all the averages from the last slide, that means credit card will go first, personal loan next, car loan, then student loan. And then you prioritize this top loan. So the minimum monthly payment is $212, and then the total payment here is $212. Now, ideally and realistically, you should actually go back to your budget and you should add more payments onto this credit card and focus on that one first because this has the highest interest rate, right? And so you should look into your budget and see where you can cut back so that you can pay more into your credit card. But I just use the base amount for simplicity for this example. So after you're done paying off the credit card, you then add this monthly amount here to the monthly amount for the personal loan. And so instead of paying $302, you're paying $514. And then when you're done paying the personal loan, you wrap the credit card and personal loan payments and put them into the car loan. So instead of paying $360, you're paying $874, and doing the exact same thing for the student loan. And this is why it's called the debt snowball, because if you imagine a small snowball at the top of the hill rolling down and gaining momentum but gaining mass as you go, it really helps pay down your debt much faster in a more organized fashion. And so that's the debt snowball, and that's how you get rid of these types of debts. because you really want to free up your budget to have and allocate savings so that you can build wealth. And I'll show you how to do that very soon. Also, as a note, not all debt is created equal, right? These debts, why I listed them, because they're a bit more superfluous. They don't actually create or generate any income or any equity. When you look at things like a mortgage, yes, it is a debt and a loan, but every year you're paying down your mortgage, you're getting equity in your home, your home's appreciating. It's somewhat of an investment, right? And so that's different than a credit card debt that is tied to nothing, that does not appreciate. Another type of loan that would be not superfluous would be something like a business loan. So if you have this great business idea and you have something that will work, it will make you money, and you get a business loan for that. Well, the business loan, even though that's a debt, it's actually being tied to the production of your business and your income, right? So that's a bit different than these types of loans. But again, you do want to really strategize, think about how to use that, and you basically want to be doing your own math and be doing your own analysis to make sure that those types of loans fit your situation. So the step right before we get to wealth building is the emergency fund, because say in this scenario, you follow this plan and you pay off all your debt, right? Then a tire blows. Well, then you don't have any liquid assets to pay for that. So you go right back into debt and put it on the credit card. So that's something that we don't want if you are wanting to move forward and start building wealth. We want you to have an emergency fund so that you don't have to go back into debt to pay for emergencies, because it's not if they happen, but it's when they happen. So how much should you put in your emergency fund? So before your debt is managed, so while you're paying off the debt, while you're doing the debt snowball, you actually want $1,000 in your savings account, right? And so this, again, is a little parachute for you, a buffer that will take care of smaller emergencies and will keep you from going back into debt or adding more debt into your debt snowball, right? And so that's the mini emergency fund. But after you pay off your debt, you want to build up an emergency fund that is 3 to 6 times your monthly living expenses. And so there's a range, because that depends on what you feel comfortable with and also your personal situation. So for people who are a bit more aggressive, for people who don't have a lot of liabilities. So for instance, my wife and I, it's just us two. We're renting, and we have a baby on the way. So we don't need as large of an emergency fund. So we're going to float around the 3 to 4 times our monthly expenses. But then for someone who has many kids, if you have a mortgage, if you have more liabilities, and if things go wrong, it could be really bad for your family. Then you'd want to float around the 5 to 6 months of emergency savings, right? And so you go back to your budget. You add up all of the categories that have to do with monthly living expenses. So savings don't count towards that. And then you multiply that by 3 to 6 based on your own assessment of your situation. And after that, we are finally here at investing. And step 4 is to just start. Now, I want to take a slight detour to show and illustrate the timing of when you should get started. So let me just go here, and I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, here we go. So this is a Dave Ramsey investing calculator. You can Google this. I like using it to illustrate to clients and prospects the power of compound interest and time. And it's meant to be used as a retirement calculator, but you can use this for any type of investment scenario when you're looking at a time frame, savings and investing in general. So we have one brother here. His name is Billy. And so Billy is 20 years old, and he has a part-time job, but he says, hey, I read about investing. I know the power of compound interest, and I should get started now. And so Billy has zero saved currently, and he decides, okay, I'm going to have a budget, manage my expenses, and I'm going to contribute $250 a month from now until I'm 67 to build a retirement nest egg, to build wealth. And so this is a little sneak peek here as far as what we're going to use and what I'm going to recommend for the type of investment. But Billy's going to use the stock market. And so the stock market gets anywhere between 8 to 12% rate of return over a long time period. So let's go right in the middle and say 10. And let's look at that. Wow. So $3.2 million at the end of the day, after 47 years of investing, Billy has saved up a $3.2 million nest egg. So that's incredible. It's huge, guys. And so this is just, again, showing that this is perfectly accessible to you, to your family members, to your friends. You just have to get started. Okay, so Billy did a wonderful job. Now his brother Johnny, he's going to be a bit older. He's going to be 25. And Johnny is working hard at school, getting his career started. But then he's a bit older than Billy, and he didn't do the research yet. But then he sees Billy investing and says, wow, I should do that too. I think that's also a great idea. So Johnny is going to start at age 25, and he has a better job than Billy. So he says, okay, I'm going to pay $400 towards my retirement, towards building wealth until I'm 67. And I'm going to do that. Now let me see his results. So as you can see, he never catches up to Billy. Though Johnny started 5 years later and he was contributing more, he never actually caught up to his brother. He is about $100,000 less than his brother ended up with at age 67. And so that, again, is the power of compound interest. Compound interest essentially is, and I'll illustrate it, you have, say, $100 and you put that into an investment for 1 year, and it gains 10%. And that's great, right? So you earn $10 off of that investment. And then you tell yourself, well, that was wonderful. I'm going to keep my money in the investment, my $110 in the investment, and I'm going to hopefully get 10% again in year 2. So that happens, a year 2 passes, and you get 10% interest on your money that you kept in the investment. So the interest now is applying to your $110. So the first year, the 10% earned you $10. The next year, the 10% earned you $11. So that's compound interest in a nutshell, where the interest rate, the percentage interest rate is basically being applied to a larger and larger amount over time. And this is why your money grows. And so if you look here, if you look at this graph, it's a really good visual representation of that. So when you're first starting out, it seems pretty small, and it's kind of like a plane, right? It takes some time to speed up, but then it levels up, and then you get this momentum here. And in year 2052, that's when Billy becomes a millionaire. But then, as you can see, after that point, 10% averaged over time affects his larger portfolio more and more from a dollar or quantity standpoint. So as you can see here in these last 2 years, the difference is about $300,000. So Johnny's portfolio made $300,000, and that's usually going to be more than your W-2 job will make if you're just working in kind of a normal job. And so that's the exciting thing too, is that your investments can earn more money than you later on down the road, and that's fascinating and really, really cool. So I'm going to go back to the presentation here. And one other thing I want to talk about is dollar cost averaging. So that is essentially what Johnny and Billy were doing. Dollar cost averaging is putting money into your investments, to your wealth building on a set increment. So for them, it was months, and they were putting a set amount. So either 250 or 400 into their investments month to month, right? And so that's dollar cost averaging. And the reason why that's a good idea is that it can reduce the impact of volatility over time. It can potentially lower the amount that you pay for your shares over time as well. And ultimately, it trains yourself to live without that money every month. And that's a big part of wealth building, is that it is very behavioral. And if you are getting used to living off and of a smaller amount of your paycheck to live under your means, you'll have more to save and more to build wealth with. Because those examples were just $250, $400 a month. What if you were able to save $500? What if you were able to save $800, $1,000 a month? What would that look like, right? And you can look up the Dave Ramsey calculator, type in your age, and type in savings amount at a 10% rate of return, and see what that looks like. And the results are phenomenal. So what do you use? And this is something that I was alluding to as far as what type of investments. But first, before we get to that, let's talk about account types, because that's very important too. Because people who build wealth are also very conscientious about taxes and about tax savings. And so I want to detour to there first before we get into the actual investment types that we're looking at here. So the first investment account that takes first priority is the employer-sponsored plan. So you have your 401ks, your 403bs, your 457s. Those are all provided by your employer most of the time if you're a full-time if you're a full-time employee. And the thing you want to take advantage here is your employer match, because it's free money. So the employer match is a benefit that some employers have, actually most employers have, that is worded something like this. We, the company, will match 100% of your contributions up to 4%. So in order to take advantage of the full match, you would have to contribute 4% to of your gross income to the 401k, and then the company will match for 1-to-1 up to 4% of your gross income. Now, the next account that is in line priority-wise is your Roth IRA. So just as a side note, you can more and more companies are coming out with Roth 401ks, Roth 403bs, and those are great too. You can use those. But if your company doesn't have a Roth version of these accounts, then you could open up a Roth IRA. So it's the Roth IRA is after-tax contributions and tax-free growth. And so I'm going to go back to the example of Billy here to show you the difference and why it is a slam dunk for a lot of young professionals to open up a Roth IRA. So if, say in Billy's scenario, scenario one, he invests this money in a 401k. So 401ks are tax deferred accounts, meaning that when you put money into them, you get a tax deduction that year, and it decreases your taxable income that year. So Billy decreased his taxable income by putting this money into a 401k the year that he did it. And so he basically took this amount and deferred the taxes, so that the money grows tax deferred, but then when you withdraw from that account, this whole pot here, that is then taxable, because you didn't take the tax in the beginning, but then the IRS wants their fair share, so they're going to tax you at the back end on any withdrawals that you take. So Billy or any of his beneficiaries that he passes this account to, someone's going to pay the taxes, right? And the amount that's taxed is this amount here. So essentially, up to 600,000 or at least $600,000 in taxes if we're looking at a 20,000 or at a 20% tax rate. But if he was to build this money in a Roth IRA, he would have contributed around 200,000, and since it's after tax, he would pay taxes only on this 200,000. So that's about $40,000 of taxes that he paid. But then this growth here is all tax-free. And so instead of him and his descendants or his beneficiaries paying at least $600,000 in taxes over time, he's paid only $40,000 in taxes, and the rest is tax-free. That's why the Roth IRA makes so much sense to use and to utilize for wealth building. Another thing with the Roth IRA is that there are income limits on it, and it does have a contribution max per year. Right now, it's at $6,000, and if you're above 50, it's $7,000. All that stuff you can look up online and get the information for. But you definitely would want to open up a Roth IRA for savings. And also, as a side note, these two accounts are retirement accounts. So they do have a caveat where you can't withdraw the money penalty-free until age 59 and a half. So if you did withdraw money from them, and there are some provisions where you can get money out of them penalty-free, but if you did withdraw from them prior to age 59 and a half, under most circumstances, the IRS is going to hit you with a 10% penalty. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. And that's why I mentioned, That's why I mentioned this third option here. It's lowest on priority because it doesn't have the beneficial tax treatments like those two accounts do, but it does have liquidity and can be used at any time. And that is a brokerage or non-qualified account. So think of that account as a savings account that you can hold investments in, right? And then you can put your investments in there or buy investments in there, and then they'll grow and create interest for you. Again, it's not a retirement account, so there's no penalty for early withdrawals, but there are capital gains. And so that's the big difference with these accounts, is that whenever you liquidate your assets and withdraw from them, you're going to pay capital gains. So any asset that is held for less than a year is taxed at the short-term capital gains rate. And that's essentially your income tax. It counts as income tax. The long-term capital gains rate is for assets that are liquidated or withdrawn from that are more than a year old. And so the long-term capital gains rate right now is 15 or 20% based on your marginal tax bracket, but that may change soon, but that is currently what the long-term capital gains is. So for the most part, it's better than your tax bracket based on where you are in the tax brackets. Oh, also, by the way, one thing I also want to mention is that for retirement savings, you want to have a goal to save up to 15% of your gross income. So if your gross income is $100,000, then you want to aim to save at least $15,000 a year towards retirement, and that's a good rate. And it works for a lot of my it's worked for a lot of my clients, and it gets you used to saving, but also not using not using the full amount that you spend that you earn, and you're living under your means. So now let's get to the part that I'm sure you joined this webinar to find out, but the investment that you should use. So like I mentioned, using the stock market is one of the most accessible, the easiest way to create interest on money that you're saving over a long period of time and doing that consistently. So first off, you want to go diversified. You want to look at companies that are in the large cap, mid cap, small cap, and international space. Now, cap just means capitalization, and that's a big fancy word for the overall value of a company. And they get that value by taking the amount of shares or stocks that they have available to purchase, and they multiply that by the stock's value, and you get the total overall value of the company. So large cap companies are worth, trillions to hundreds of billions of dollars. Mid cap companies are worth tens of billions of dollars, and then small cap companies are smaller than that. And of course, international stocks, those are companies that are offshores outside of America, and they are also spliced out into large, mid, and small cap. But these are the general categories that you want to look at, and the general types of funds that you want to invest in to keep yourself diversified. And I actually didn't mention what being diversified means, but diversification essentially is putting your money in many baskets, and the baskets are companies, right? So companies will have good years, bad years. Some companies may go out of business. Some companies may fly to the moon, right? But you want to invest your money in a way that it's not dependent on one specific company or even a handful of companies for it to be successful and to produce consistent interest year to year. So you want to invest in many companies so that they can basically correct for themselves if some go up and some go down. And the easiest way to do that is through purchasing mutual funds or index funds. Because if you were to buy, say, an individual stock and try to diversify your portfolio and buy, 100 to 500 different companies, you'd need billions of dollars. And the reason being is because some share or the share prices for some stocks are in the hundreds, even the thousands of dollars, right? And so if you want to actually diversify and buy individual stocks, you need to have millions of dollars. But mutual funds and index funds, they package the stocks for you, so they have their own basket or portfolio of stocks, and you just buy the share of the mutual fund or index fund, and then you're basically exposed to all of those stocks that they have in their portfolio. The big difference between mutual funds and index funds is that mutual funds are managed by professionals, and so they have a management team or like one professional manager that pulls the strings, does the buying and selling of the stocks, and acts the investment plan. While index funds, they're just set up to follow an index. So like the S&P 500, the Russell 2000, the Dow Jones Industrial, it's just meant to mimic that and get the return that index usually gets. And so the fees in index funds are usually lower than mutual funds, because mutual funds have people that they have to pay, right, to do the management. Now, does that mean because index funds have lower fees that they're better than mutual funds? Well, the internet will tell you so, but I would actually disagree with the internet, because if you do proper research, and there are many resources like Morningstar.com that you can search for mutual funds on, free and paid services, but you can actually find mutual funds that are worth their fee because they're outperforming their benchmark or their index, right? Because every mutual fund has kind of a space that it's in, and there's an index that correlates with it. And if they're beating that index over a long period of time, then that's actually a great investment, and it's worth having the management fees on that mutual fund versus just trying to invest with the index and get that the index's average return, right? And so either of them work. You just have to do research on them. And again, tools like Morningstar.com are a great place to start to look those things up. So I want to address the elephant in the room. And it's a very common news story, a very common theme in the past month or two. But what about things like r/Wall Street Bets, day trader gurus on YouTube, Reddit stock forums, my cousin who tells me to buy the latest hot stock, etc.? Well, first off, currently, how people are using the stock market right now is very indicative of how people use and see casinos. They arbitrarily purchase companies because people on forums or they themselves think a stock is undervalued, with actually having no way to assess it and value it, and actually looking at the financials or the things that the companies are developing, and they put money into it hoping that it will go up, and they try to trade and buy and sell it throughout the day to make profit. And that is really not the way to go, because there have been many studies. The Adalbar actually did a study on this, but the average investor who does this and is not a professional, they underperform the overall stock market. So they just compare it to the S&P 500 and the historical returns on that. They heavily underperform the overall stock market, because humans are very bad at guessing when the stock market is high or low, and they purchase and sell things based on their emotions, which you should never ever do. And by investing in index funds and mutual funds, and just putting money into those things month to month, that takes out the emotion and puts in a systematic way of building wealth. So I wouldn't recommend that unless you actually know what you're doing. You do have to watch out for gurus, especially those who advertise to you on Facebook or YouTube, saying that, oh, you have to make X amount of trades a week and you'll be a millionaire, things like that. Because unfortunately, they have also read books on making an online course and how that can make you a lot of money. And so you're actually the customer to that, and you're paying them more than the value that they're actually giving you. So be very wary of gurus, of especially ones that make really wild promises. I'd be very wary about those. Again, you can find good stock trading or investment classes online, but you need to do research on that and read some reviews. Lastly, you can get very wealthy by doing your own trading, so being like a stock trader, but that really entails you assuming that as your job, right? When getting into this, it takes an inordinate amount of research. You should be following good forums. You should be having mentors. You should even maybe go to school for it. And it's going to take up your entire day, because when you're stock trading, you have to pay attention to your portfolio. You have to know the different types of investment strategies that you can employ. It's not just buying and selling stocks. There are also options and futures, things like that. And it becomes a job and less of an investment, because an investment is something that you put your money into and you're doing it in a wise way. It's researched and you're letting your money work for itself, but this is you working for your money. So it really depends on what kind of life you want to have. And if you have a 9-to-5 job, you're not going to have time to do stock trading at the same time, right? Or do it well at the same time. You can stock trade with any amount of time you want, but to do it well, you're going to need more time during your day. So that's really the choice that the choices that that are set out in front of you when wanting to do your own stock trading. And that's where I would caution you to really know what you're doing, to take the time to research it, to understand it, and to have the time during the day to work the job. Because there's going to be a lot of learning, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes in the beginning. And so that concludes my presentation, and I'm not seeing any questions on here, and I did go kind of long, so I am just going to end it there. Thank you all so much for attending the webinar. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I hope to see you during our next webinar.